Welcome back, everyone, to our weekly Doctor Who rewatch, our weekly New Who Doctor Who rewatch, because I guarantee if I say just Doctor Who, people will get annoyed. Last week we did Rose, the first episode from the 2005 revival, and this week me and Liam are looking at The End of the World, which is the second episode.
Makes sense.
The general plot of this is that, trying to impress Rose, the Doctor takes her to the year 5 billion / Apple / something, and shows her the end of the world exploding. Hijinks ensue. There's a murder attempt, and yeah. So I guess we'll start with your overall thoughts.
I always thought I preferred Rose to this one, but having watched them both recently, I think I prefer this one. Only just.
Yeah.
Which was a surprise to me, but I think it's because I had less to roll my eyes at with this one. I'm like, oh, okay, that was a bit cheesy. I think that's why I maybe slightly prefer it. It's very close, but overall I really like this one a lot. I think it's a good kind of introduction to the wider world of time traveling with the Doctor, and there's some good layering in of the Doctor's past and that mystery. I think it's a jolly good romp.
Fair enough. I'm slightly the other way.
End this now.
And I think I definitely preferred Rose. I thought this one was a bit too long, and there was some issues that I didn't necessarily like. But that being said, it is just another monster of the week. It is something easy, and it does. I put somewhere saying, it does establish what traveling with a Doctor is actually like.
Yeah, I think I also look on this one quite fondly because there is a bit of setup. With like Cassandra, who we know comes back now, Face of Bow obviously becomes quite a major thing.
Yeah, there is that. There are a lot of things in here that do return, and even I think this is the first time Bad Wolf is mentioned out loud as well.
Yeah.
So that sets that up. But yeah, I did enjoy this. It's not that I didn't, but it was sort of at the midway point where I was sort of going, how long's left? But that might be just me. But I don't know.
It is funny actually, because one of my things is like, I wish it was a bit longer.
Interesting. All right. Well, I guess we'll start with before we get to critiques. What did you enjoy the most about
it? My main thing was the world building of it, with the vast array of the aliens and stuff they put on show. I think the costuming and everything, they did a great job of that. The setting of Platform 1 I thought was very well realised. Religion is banned. We prohibit use of teleportation and religion. I just like that kind of very subtle world building with that. I just think the whole world of the episode was very well realised in that sense. And I think it makes the whole universe feel quite big and overwhelming because they throw everything at you straight away, which is why I think I really enjoyed that scene, particularly this time I watched it with Rose being like, "Okay, I'm gonna head out."
Interesting, because I'm at the other end for that.
I love that this is only the second time we've done this, and we've already disagreeing on stuff like just wait for the Moffat era.
Oh, I know. Okay, well, before we get to my issues, we'll get. I agree with the unique aliens and the world building. That's my top one. Is the amount of different aliens that you see in this is ridiculous, and they're not reused props. Like if you see aliens come back in newer episodes, even in the most recent one, they're just reused props. They're recognizable, reused. They could have easily put in an Auton, a Silurian, a Sea Devil, a Zygon, or whatever, and just got them out of storage. But the fact that they went all out and went, we'll create all these new aliens, really adds to the universe. One thing I noticed was, how is the National Trust still alive?
Yeah.
5 billion years into, I get the nice reference, but at the same time, I'm like,
there are a few things like that kind of date the episode. Like even Rose mentioning News Round Extra, I was like, wow, I haven't seen News Round Extra since I was 10.
They said I'll do News Round Extra. I was like, oh my god. A nice synergy, BBC, but that's not what we need right now.
Rose's phone as well. I was like, oh my god, we are so ancient now.
Yeah. Well, I'll stick on the phone in a minute, and I'll mention this now because obviously, 2 episodes down the line, she goes back home and she's been gone a year. So when does that phone call take place? It's always bothered me every time I watch this episode because it can't be during that year, unless it's literally like the day after, maybe.
It might be, yeah.
I can only think maybe it's a bit in the future after the year, or it's the week before she actually left.
Yeah, exactly like how that phone works and stuff. I don't think they ever really take the time to explain it.
It's one of those things that will bug me forever, but doesn't really need explaining. I mean, that's what a Doctor Who fan is, nitpicking the small things that don't really need explaining.
Yeah, which is me yet again, struggling to find things that I didn't particularly like about it. So I have the ridiculous nitpick this week, I think, of ridiculous thing I didn't like.
Yeah, I think you probably will. So unique aliens, some of which do come back. Obviously, the face of Bone makes a return. Cassandra comes back eventually. The unfortunate demise of the Mox of Balhoun means he doesn't come back. I don't think the Forest of Cheam ever come back.
No, I don't think so.
And then, all of the aliens, you don't even see them as, as getting them out of the prop department. So they just must have binned the costume straight away. But it adds to the flair, and it adds to the fact that this platform goes around the universe doing these kinds of events, and it's just another posh person event, really. It's nothing like, billions of people aren't watching. It's just a select few, an art gallery, basically. But yeah, I enjoyed that. And then my next best is Chris Braxton again. And I think he does a better job in this episode showcasing his Doctor than he did in the first.
I'd agree, yeah.
Because he goes from, and you can see it, like in the very first episode, which picks off literally as Rose ended, he's so excited to take her and go and show her all of these things. And it made me think, is this his first, adventure as this Doctor? Because obviously it's implied in Rose that he's just regenerated into Chris Ferguson, which makes me think that this might be his first full-on adventure, maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I might be wrong. Big Finish might come at me with that. But I know how they got around it in Time Lord Victorious was that Rose was unconscious, recovering on a planet after an adventure. So that's how he was there instead.
Yeah, I could see that working.
So this makes me think it's his first adventure, which is why he's even more excited. And then you see that at its peak when Tainted Love comes on in Platform 1 with the infamous dancing gif. And I mean, that is his Doctor is happiest, I think. And then we do see him at probably one of his lowest moments.
Yeah.
When at least 3 people have died, one of which he was quite close to, and then he just lets the villain die.
Yeah.
So like, just even Rose is like, help her, and he's like, nah, she's gonna die. Sorry.
Yeah, that'd be crispy.
But so I think he was really good throughout this whole episode. I mean, he is throughout the whole series, but I noticed it a lot more rewatching it this time.
Yeah. My next big positive was the kind of contrast between the relationship with the Doctor and Rose and the Doctor and Jabe. Like, Jabe is a badass. I really liked her. I've always really enjoyed her character, but rewatching it this time, because I haven't seen this episode in ages, I was like, Jabe is so cool. Ironically cool, considering how it ends for her. Too soon, forever too soon. But yeah, the kind of contrasts in the fact that, this episode dedicates a lot of time to showing Rose doesn't really know who the Doctor is yet. She questions him about his past. That really kind of grinds his gears. They have a bit of a spat over it. Versus Jabe kind of scans him, finds out who he is, knows all that history of the Time Lords, knows what went down. She can comfort him over it, whereas Rose doesn't have that knowledge. And, when it's a very similar scene in a sense, with Jabe confronting the Doctor about who he is versus when Rose did it earlier in the episode. But instead he cries and holds her hand and stuff. That contrast I thought was really interesting to showcase how out of her depth Rose still is, how new to this she still is, how much she still doesn't know about the Doctor, and that she just ran into this TARDIS on a whim, really. I thought that was really interesting. And then the fact that Rose watched her planet burn and disappear in this one, or like saw the consequences of that. And then the Doctor revealed that he's gone through the same thing right at the end, and that's the moment when they kind of got brought together. I thought that was a really interesting arc and a way of using those two relationships.
I guess, obviously you mentioned that Nine says his planet exploded. So do you think after Day of the Doctor it loses that emotional bit a little bit, or do you think it just sort of doesn't matter at this point?
Not for me, because every showrunner is going to change something. I think, granted, I don't think they did explore the concept enough when Gallifrey's alive, Time Survived. But I think there's only so far they can take. The Doctor's the only Time Lord left, especially if they want to keep bringing the Master back again and again and again. Even that last Time Lord thing is going to lose its shtick very quickly. And I think it did by that point when Gallifrey was brought back anyway. So I don't really mind it, but I can see why people would be a bit pissed off. But, what this new series did also undid all those classic stories with the Time Lords in the classic series, which is a much longer period of history. So I can see why people would probably have been upset at the time as well that they killed them all off.
Yeah. And so I guess sort of, and I did put, if I can find it somewhere, the weight of choice to leave dawns on Rose.
Yeah.
Which I think you see that a lot, when she runs away from the aliens and when she has the sort of argument with the Doctor, is that she's literally did not think about this at all. He came back and she went, fuck it, I'll leave.
So I thought it was very interesting at the end of the last one when she was like, is it always just dangerous? And he's like, yeah. And she was like really intrigued by that. And at the end of this one, he's like, you've seen how dangerous it is. Do you want to go home? And she's like, I don't know, actually. So I like that it was really that impulsive.
Yeah, and this episode sort of grounds her in this universe. Now she's not new to it, I guess. This is the sort of the end of the mini arc of her becoming a full-time companion, I guess. And then with Jabe, I think that's a missed opportunity, and I think it's something that the new series has missed quite a lot, is having that type of alien companion.
Yes.
We get it with Jack a little bit towards the end of this series, and we get hints of it in what it would be like this series, in this episode. And I think it's something that they could explore more, because she does have that layer of knowledge and awareness of things. But then the argument is that a human companion means the audience has the way in, I guess, even though Rose isn't with them for the majority of this episode. Which
I also found interesting, because it's like her first, basically her first adventure with him. And he's just like, well, bye, I'm going to do my own thing, you do your own thing.
So, well, if you're going to sulk, I'm going to do my own thing. Bye. But yeah, so I guess if you got any other intriguing points, any best moments?
My final one was the entire final sequence, starting with Rose talking about the fact that we're all so busy saving ourselves, no one was here to watch the Earth die. I thought that was really poignant. I really liked the emotion, how that speech was written, and then how that leads into the final compensation with the Doctor saying, oh, my planet's gone, I'm the only one left. And then Rose was like, well, let's get chips, bye.
Yeah.
I thought that was
sorry, your planet died.
It was a nice human moment, kind of saying, living in the here and now, we still have all this time. Earth isn't really gone for us yet. We can still enjoy it while it's here. I thought that was a really nice moment to end the episode on, considering that last scene is actually really quite sad when the Doctor opens up about it. There's still that hopefulness to him, and I think that showcases the good that Rose ultimately does, the Ninth Doctor, I think, in like his whole grieving process.
Yeah, and I think we see the grieving process again come to the end of that arc, I think, in Dalek, where he finally decides to let something live, even though it's killing itself. He decides to let it live, whereas in this episode, he lets Cassandra die. But yeah, about that final sort of 5 minutes, I guess. I think that's the first mention we get of, the Time War, like actually, in a full conversation, and his species and what happened. That's sort of like the tiniest bit of backstory we get to the Doctor in these first two episodes.
Yeah, they mentioned the war in the last one when he was talking to the Nestine, but we didn't really know how big of a thing it was, and that it destroyed his entire planet. And
then it does tease the Daleks, which comes later on in the series. And so watching it back, you notice that, and it's like, well, that's laying some groundwork for the future to move forward, for the next series. Yeah. I do think that Rose understood by the end of it what her role in this was. and that it's not to run off and wait somewhere else until the Doctor sorts it. It's to be by his side and help him when he needs it, like Jabe did. Because if it was Rose instead of Jabe, no one would have died, or at least someone in that situation would have died.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my final point was Murray Gold music. I know you didn't like it sort of in the first one.
I did have a few moments in this one when I was like, I don't know. I think it's just because the themes are so familiar to me now. I was like, oh, this really stands out because I recognise it. I don't think it was anywhere near as prominent in this one. I didn't have a problem with it really here.
I only noticed it in the sort of final moments of the episode. Other than that, I just didn't pay attention to it. But when the Doctor's going through those fans, I thought the use of music in that, where he sort of calms himself down and does it, I thought that was done really well.
Yeah, I like that bit.
And that's the kind of theme for the Ninth Doctor. I think it's used throughout this series, and I think it is a little bit in series 2. But yeah, and that whole theme just makes me think of Ninth Doctor whenever I hear it. But yeah, and then my last point, because I had an extra one, was the amount of borderline adult humor they managed to get into this episode.
Yeah. I remember my young, naive self when Jabe accused Rose of being a prostitute. I had no idea what that word was, so it just went completely over my head. I remember it going over my head at the time. I was like, oh, why is she offended by that? And now I'm like, oh, okay.
And the other one was Rose calling Cassandra a bitchy trampoline. And I was like, hang on a minute, they can't say that at 7 p.m. on BBC One. Yeah, so I'm surprised that managed to make the cut. But and again, that's something that would have gone over my head, when it was said, because I wouldn't have known what it meant. But and I guess that's another thing I liked. I liked Rose's kind of disgust of Cassandra, I guess, and how she'd purposely made herself be the last human, basically out of pure spite and racism.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a unique dynamic that it gets explored more in series 2. But they didn't really use in this one. And then when Cassandra's like, "Oh, you could do with some work, your chin's a bit funny." I was like, "Oh, all right, you're a flat woman in a frame
with a brain underneath you in the jar. Let's calm down."
Yeah, so there are some good points in this episode. It's definitely not, my least favorite Christopher Eccleston episode. We'll get to that later in the series. I imagine we probably might have the same one.
I'm guessing so.
But well, you know what my favorite is. So if it's not that, then it's fine.
It's one of my absolute favorites as well.
Good. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this episode. I do think it was. Well, we'll go on to negatives now, and one of mine is that I thought it was a bit too long. I mean, I think there was more moments when you sort of stopped and thought about things, which in the context of the episode makes sense for Rose, because that's her whole plot, is that she's finally stopping and thinking about what's happening. But I think from a viewer point of view, I was kind of like, I just didn't. It just seemed to take its time getting to the end. And then again, with every Doctor Who episode, it goes, it all builds and builds and builds, and then it's done. Yeah. But so, what was your first negative, I guess?
This is like, again, my only real thing. I was like, it's not even like a criticism. It's like, I wish they'd done this. And it's just about maybe the length of time. I wish we'd seen a bit more of those other aliens and spent a bit more time getting to know them, exactly where they're from. Because once they're introduced, they're basically just like, they might as well have been cardboard cutouts, just placed in the background. Mox Balhoun dies. Oh, it's very sad. He had like 3 lines. I don't really care. Sorry, Mox. And I guess just knowing where the Face a Bow thing comes later on down the line, it would have been nice to actually see the Doctor and Face a Bow interact in this one, but they don't. And then the next time we see him in New Earth, he's like, "Hello, old friend." It's like, you never even spoke to him. So that was a bit like, but again, I can look past that. And I just think maybe, I don't even know what would I cut out to make room for it. So even like the scene where Rose talks to the mechanic lady, I really like that scene. It's like, she's aware of like, oh, I don't know this guy. And then I really like how she gets killed. Because I think it's quite brutal. So yeah, I feel like I had something. Oh yeah, maybe when Rose is knocked out by the repeated meme guys and she's in danger, the Doctor saves her. I felt like they could have cut that out because she ends up in the same danger 5 minutes later anyway. Maybe get rid of that, spend a bit more time getting to know the aliens. But again, maybe that would have affected the pacing because you already thought maybe it was a bit slow there. Maybe that would have just dragged that out. I don't know. But for me, I would have liked a bit more time to get to know the other aliens a bit. I think that could have been an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think for me where it dragged a little bit was more with the steward and his death. Although it sort of sets up how everyone's going to die, it does it 3 times. You've got the steward, you've got Rose doing it, and then you've got everyone.
Yeah.
So I think they could definitely cut either the steward or Rose out of it because I don't think one of them adds anything. You could replace the steward with, you know, a sentient computer, which basically there already is on the platform anyway. That's the whole point, is that it's all automated.
I looked it up today actually because my next negative is kind of to do with the steward. The actor who plays him is in Face the Raven 10 years later.
Who is he in that? Is he?
He's like the guy who's like really hairy, like a kind of wolfy guy.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. I was like, oh, it's the steward guy. So I've always like, there's something about the steward's death that's always really like, oh wow, that's kind of awful. That's always like, ever since I first watched it, that really got to me. That's always stood out.
It's when they come back and they're like, oh my god, is this steward in there? And the Doctor's just like, yeah, you can smell him. I'm like, oh, all right.
Oh dear.
But yeah, because they even say in the episode like, oh, this whole place is automated. It's all done by itself. And even then, I'm thinking, then why is the steward there? If it's all done by itself, why are there, you know, why are there servants? Why is there a steward? But I don't know. That's my personal point.
Yeah, it's an automated station, but we need a mechanic.
Yeah, we need a plumber, specifically a plumber.
Yes, a plumber. They still have plumbers 5 billion years from now, which is good to know.
But so was that your main negative then? Because if that was, then I've got.
I actually like the death itself. My little thing about it was like the spiders pressing one button lowers the filter, and then it seems so much more complicated to undo it, and he can't do it. And I'm like, surely you'd know that. And I was like, well, I guess the spiders like hacked into the mainframe and made it like impossible. But then Cassandra later on says they've just been in place, and then she activates them, and then they all blow up. So they didn't actually do anything. I was like, what a shitty system! If it only takes one button on the keyboard to lower the filter, and it's a lot more complicated to raise it back up again. I thought that was a bit strange, but I can look past it.
Yeah, I did think that when the button was pushed and he was just going, I was like, push some other buttons, and then he did. No. I was like, oh, he's tried.
There was a few moments like that when he was just staring at it for a bit, and even the Doctor and the fans, he like looked back at Jabe like 20,000 times. I'm like, get on with it. You could have saved her life if you'd been a bit quicker.
Just cross. Now you've stopped. She's dead and it's going faster. Look what you've done. Yeah, but that's it. I get that sometimes it builds tension, but then when you stop and think about it, it's like you can build tension other ways. Cut to maybe, you know, people dying, which they do anyway in the fan scene.
Yeah. So, he's just there like staring at Jabe, and Moxabone's frying in his chair. Poor bastard.
Whoopsie. But I guess that's the other point. And again, it's a small nitpick. Who designed that fan and that platform in that situation? Why? Who looks at that and goes, right, we've got a walkway. Let's put some big fans in the middle of it. I put specifically, it's like a video game level when you've got to time yourself to go through. And it works in a video game.
The critical switch that can save lives at the other end of this huge ass room.
Yeah, with a big fan going around. And I don't know, it's futuristic, I guess, and I guess
they could have just put it where the thing that Jabe had to pull down was.
Yeah. So it's a lever there, make it that lever, but but no. Again, that's a minor detail, and it wasn't like one of my worst criticisms for it, to be fair. My worst one is Rose again.
Surprise.
And again, it's because, and you know, I get where it comes from, and maybe it's having all these seasons of New Who and have the companions be good to go in like their second episode, I guess. But in this one, she does feel very underused and useless, I guess. She leaves almost straight away. She comes back once, has a chat with Cassandra, and then leaves again. And then she's stuck in her room for the rest of the episode, doing nothing.
Yeah, she's knocked out by those people, the Doctor rushes to save her, and she doesn't stop to say, "Oh, by the way, it's those guys who did this and knocked me out."
Yeah.
That would have
Yeah.
at least sped the process along to finding out it was Cassandra, but he
Well,
just didn't
exactly.
mention.
And then, the only scene of, I guess, importance she gets aside from Cassandra is the one with the plumber. And I don't quite know what the point of it is. Because it's a nice scene, don't get me wrong. It's nice having that moment between those two. But the plumber gets killed and Rose gets put elsewhere. So I don't know if it's supposed to make Rose, maybe they were worried that they wouldn't like Rose after how she left Mickey, and they were trying to do a, look, she is a nice person type thing. But I don't think it necessarily adds to her character as much, especially when...
I think they kind of, what I got from it was that was the first time she actually said out loud, "Well, I'm really far away from home. And I just ran up with this random man. I don't really know him." And it's that was the first mention of that in the episode. So I think that was kind of the point of it, because we have Ruffalo, who knows where she's from. She's this alien. She's used to all this. And Rose doesn't know, exactly where she's from at this point in time. She doesn't know who the Doctor is. I think that was kind of setting the seed for that mini arc, I think.
Yeah. And then the other thing I've got is that, she complains that the TARDIS is sort of in her head, doing whatever. And I get that would be a pretty weird thing to do. And then she was like, "Oh, but you didn't ask me if I wanted that." I'm like, you haven't asked him anything. You've just gone with him straight away. And he's asked you, "Where do you want to go?" You've not asked. As soon as you get in there, you'd be like, "Right, so what's the situation?"
Yeah, they both didn't sign the T's and C's before she ran in. They probably should have ironed that out a bit.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's the whole point of this episode, is that arc is rushed through this episode to get it out of the way for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Like with Martha, that conversation is had in episode 3, I think. Gridlock?
Yes.
When she sort of confronts him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that, and then the other thing is that Rose was sort of very, towards the start of the episode, very sort of self-absorbed. She was very much, "Oh my God, that's my planet. All these people are terrible people. I'm so upset. This is terrible for me." And I'm like, I mean, I get it would be emotional, but you don't have to make it all about you, I guess. But
yeah, I can kind of get that, I suppose. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I see Rose's character as for most of the series, is very much how does it affect me?
Yeah, I actually think I prefer her in season 1 to series 2.
Interesting. I think she grows into it a bit more in series 2. But I think in series 1, she's a bit more, this is going to impact me. How is this going to, how am I feeling? I don't care about how you feel. How am I feeling?
Yeah, I feel like that's both seasons for her.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, she gets out of it a little bit by the end when she actually sort of checks on the Doctor and says, "It's all right. I'll stick with you and we'll go get chips," and things like that. She finally thinks of somebody other than herself. But I mean, what can you say?
And she did want to call her mum, which is nice, compared to how the last phone call to her mum, how she treated her with that. That was a nice bit of development, I suppose. Yeah,
well, because it would have only been about half an hour between then and that second phone call, wouldn't it, for her?
Yeah.
The other thing for me is the CGI. I know we spoke a bit about CGI in the first episode, and it wasn't too bad, but this one I think you can really see the 2005 limitations.
The spiders.
Yes.
Yeah, the spiders is the only bit that's like, ooh.
Yeah, when the spiders come out of their balls, especially, because you can see they're sort of placed on the video and not in it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a small thing. That, and like the platform one and the Earth sort of CGI is pretty good. The Cassandra CGI is a little bit dodgy at times, I think. But they get that better in series 2. Whether that's just because it's better technology or if they just work on it, I don't know.
I don't think it looks too bad, really. I really liked Cassandra's a bit actually in this one. I think because so much time has passed since then, kind of almost forgot. Like, oh yeah, she's campy and she can be quite fun, and there is a lot to her. Like that scene where she was like low key pretty racist. Might not be low key, but low-key at the time, because it was like, well, you know, Doctor Who's never been about those kind of issues, you know.
No, of course not.
No, so there's actually like a really interesting depth to her there, and the fact that she is this terrible, terrible person.
So I guess obviously she comes back in series 2. Does knowing how she got to that point technically in the first place, do you feel more sympathy for her, or do you just think she's still a terrible person?
I think I'll have to rewatch New Earth before I can say either way. So I felt bad for her in that episode, but I think that's because of how it all plays out with Chip more so.
Yeah.
But watch this space in...
That'll be 13 weeks, I would expect.
13, 14, 15... Oh, God.
We'll
in a while.
We've got 11 of this left, and then we'll have the Christmas invasion. Yeah. 15, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then when she exploded as well, that was more graphic than I remembered it being.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just like gore just covering everyone.
I love the zoomed in on her face and she's like, I'm too young. Like, Zoe Wanamaker's really good in this. I really like the voice she does.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and I think the problem she has with her second episode is that she's not Cassandra for long in it. So in this one, she's fully Cassandra and she's got more time to be that person.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, so I enjoyed her there. And I enjoyed the Doctor technically killing her, because I do wonder if he specifically chose just to bring Cassandra back, because obviously she teleports with her moisturizing people. So it seems odd if he just reversed it. Why didn't all three come back?
Yeah. So she could get her comeuppance. That's why.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Is that maybe, and if ever they do a Target novel, maybe they'll explain it. But I reckon the Doctor just brought her back specifically because he knew.
I think this would be a really good episode for a Target novel.
Yeah. Well, they could do a lot, especially with the aliens. I imagine the Target novel will add in more.
Yeah, that would give me what I wanted, I think.
Yeah, where you get more time with them. But yeah, and then that's technically both of my negative points. What's your terrible nitpick?
The Doctor staring down Rose while he's pumping the TARDIS at the start. Made me violently uncomfortable that he's just doing this and staring her down, smiling. I was like, what the hell are you doing, sir? I want to leave. The very first note I put in is Doctor showing off, which is the same clip. But yeah, you're right. It is very... It's not very subtle.
No. Sort of sticking on that point, Jabe is surprisingly horny in this as well, which I felt quite uncomfortable with. She's very flirtatious with the Doctor, very much like, oh, you're new and interesting. And it's slightly uncomfortable, and I've known it on a low instinct level for years that it's made me uncomfortable. But yeah, because even when she accepts the breath from his lungs, it's a bit...
How intimate.
Yeah. She's just a little bit...
I love her design, though. I think the makeup job on her is fantastic.
Well, that's what I also thought. I reckon that's probably why they've never returned, because both her and her two brothers are very heavily make-upped. So they've definitely not come back, because that would take hours to do.
Probably, yeah.
But yeah, and that's what I thought from most of the aliens. I was like, they've put proper effort into these outfits and costumes. Even if most of them end up dead, including the poor Monster Balhoun. So they literally only could use that costume for that one episode. And then they put it in the Doctor Who experience in Cardiff.
Indeed. That's where most of these costumes ended up, actually.
Yeah, well, so I don't know, but I don't know. That's a minor thing. And then you mentioned, the face of Bo, and the fact that he's basically not really in this definitely makes me think they had no idea that Jack was going to be,
definitely. It wasn't a long-term plan, I don't think.
No, but then I did pick up that he sponsored the event, which now that you know who he is kind of weird. But at the same time, maybe he had to sponsor the event, because if he didn't sponsor the event, then the Doctor and Rose wouldn't get there, and then the Doctor and Rose would never meet Jack, and then Jack would never turn into the face of Bo.
Mm.
So I don't know. But that's one of them things that we'll never know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose I can deal with that. Yeah, I put down here the use of tainted love / toxic, which yeah, at the time it went over my head, but now that I watch it, I'm like, this is just ridiculous.
It is a bit, yeah. Those were the moments where I was like, okay.
Yeah, and especially now because obviously we're in 2021 now, and you think of all the music that's come out before, you're like, they wouldn't have picked these songs.
No.
But obviously they don't have future songs in 2005. But Toxic is very much this is one of the big hits of the recent years. Let's put it in.
This is an iPod. Like, did none of the history books survive from years ago?
It was 5 billion years. People won't remember. And then
should have all been online. See.
Well, I don't know. Maybe when they went to New Earth, they just didn't take the internet with them. They thought we can leave that behind.
Probably for the best, to be honest.
But yeah, I think that's most of my points, really. Did you have any other additions?
I do not think so.
Oh, fair enough. I think we've rounded this off quite nicely. But yeah, I mean, again, this episode was sort of definitely not the worst. It's a fine episode. It wouldn't be my go-to episode for this series.
No, me either.
I still would rather watch Rose than this one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I enjoyed it overall. I would definitely watch it again. And I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean
that's still better than average. That's still 60%.
Yeah, I'm not doing the IGN rating where 5 is terrible, or 5 is mediocre. Right?
5 is it's good. Like 5 is average.
Yeah, exactly. So if I gave it a 2, then you would know it'd be terrible. That's where I'm setting the base at. So 6 for End of the World. So what would you give it?
I'd give it an 8. It's like my overall rating for Rose was 7.5, and I only just prefer this one. I think Rose probably has more watchability because it's the first one of the new series. It's the introduction to the Ninth Doctor and Rose and stuff like that. But I think in terms of just sit down to watch as an episode, I prefer this one.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's everything then, really. We should be back with next week with the Unquiet Dead. For the longest time, I thought it was like the Unquite Dead because it just never clocked with me. I never read it properly. I was like,
that would still work.
Unquite's a strange word. Unquiet makes much more sense.
Yes, excellent title.
I'm looking forward to that one. I remember liking it a fair bit.
It's legitimately one of my favourites of Series 1, so I'm excited.
I expect it to be a higher rating than 8 then.
It will be.
Oh, okay. Well, come back to find out which number it is.
Yeah, or watch me rewatch it this time. I absolutely hate it.
I've made a terrible mistake.
Oh God, I started this video with an apology.
But yeah, okay. If you like this episode, then subscribe down below. I'm sure there'll be another one along next week. If you like Liam, then I'll link his channel down below, and he does content a lot more regularly than myself. But yeah, that's everything from us. We'll see you next week. Bye.